Good afternoon. We are calling our City Council workshop agenda to order, April 8th. It is about 4:21 in the afternoon. The meeting was scheduled to start at 4. The persons that we are meeting with that will be giving us our presentation today are delayed in traffic, and so we will recess at this time, and as soon as they arrive, we will reopen the meeting. We stand in recess at about 4:22. Today are delayed. We are reconvening our workshop, April 8th, 2019. It is now about 4:37 p.m. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting in order. Let the record reflect that there are 3 persons from council that are present. We have absences from Mayor Bobby Hocking, who is at home resting from a medical procedure. I believe he is scheduled to be at our meeting, our regular meeting tonight, and so I would, if there's no objection from council, I would consider this to be an excused absence, as well as Councilwoman McAuliffe, who also had a previously scheduled appointment, and so we would consider, with no objection from council, that to be an excused absence. Moving forward, item 3, new business, will be a presentation discussion regarding a proposed development agreement between the City of Lamarque, Texas and Woodhaven Lakes for trails at Woodhaven Lakes subdivision and provide direction to the city manager. So at this time, Charlene, we would like to call the Padua Realty Group so that they can begin to give us a presentation.
Yes. Mr. Padua?
Padua. Sir, you can come to the podium and give us your name and your business before you begin.
Okay.
Give us your name and your business before you begin.
Tony Padua, and Trails at Woodhaven Lakes LTD is the owner of the project that's Trails at Woodhaven Lakes.
Thank you.
So again, we know you guys are busy, so we apologize again for the tardiness. Trying to get out of Houston was a mess today. So I wanted to we really appreciate you guys giving us the time to learn about this project better. We really would like to get going on this project. It's been through some twists and turns. Really, over this property has been they've been trying to do a development on this property since early to mid 2000s, 2004, 2005, and I'll go over the timeline in a sec. But what we're proposing now is a mixed use community consisting of the single family component to it, which it's about 48 acres, and the homes will be from $200,000 to $300,000 in that price range. The total infrastructure and land development costs on our part before we sell the lots to the home builders is estimated around $13 million, and total taxable values is expected to be in excess of $50 million once all the houses are built out. The senior living component of it, we started doing research on this last year, and we got a market study done, and we had recently completed a senior housing facility in Conroe, Texas that was very successful, and it's not an institutional feeling senior living. It's more of a resort style where there's all the services are provided. There's activities and it's a mix for independent adults, assisted living, and memory care services. The total development cost of that is in the 20 to 25 million, so it's a pretty significant investment on our part. And we actually build the vertical construction on that as well. And then we would leave about 2.5 acres to 3 acres as a commercial, and hopefully something complementary with both the neighborhood and the senior housing component of it. And then last but not least, on 18 acres, we have a series of lakes, trails, playgrounds, barbecue grill, fitness equipment, and we really think that's going to be a very nice amenity for the community. So before I get into a little more detail on that, I just like to go through a quick timeline of this project. Around 2006, this property was being planned by a different developer. His name is Harvin Moore. They formed the PID, and they had a couple builders lined up. In 2008, the crash came, and then nothing happened until about 2016. The developer just wanted to sell, and none of the partners wanted to go along with it. So we looked into buying all the property from that partnership. And we put together a contract to purchase that in the fall of 2016. At that point, we knew that we needed to have some kind of reimbursement agreement in place for the numbers to work out, to do a quality development. And at that time, there were 50 lots were being approved. And then in December of 2016, we went to Mud 68, which is the mud that Saltgrass Crossing is in, and they voted to annex us, to agree to go through the procedures of annexing us into the mud. But then in spring 2017, Marque issued a moratorium on 50-foot lots, and so we had to go back and revise all the plans, plats, feasibilities, all that. Then in fall and winter of 2017, we had numerous conversations with different members of the city about development, planning, engineering, and that we wanted a pit or a mud, and we felt like we were having some good discussions, so we went ahead and purchased the first section, or the 42 acres, which was for the about 150 lots. And then we also had an option to purchase 33 acres, but we didn't know if it was zoned properly at the time. In October of 2017, we closed on those 42 acres. In March of 2018, we had a pre-development meeting with the former city manager, Carol Butler, Alex Getty, Susie Sutton, Councilman Robert, and several other staff, and we discussed zoning, PID, or a MUD, amenities, and we discussed that the zoning change was required for the 33 acres, which was going to be the last few sections. And then the city manager indicated she did not want to do any more MUDs at that time, and she would prefer a PID, and everyone in that meeting also encouraged us to go the PID route. And this is back March 2018. And we also discussed that the PID that was already approved for this project had to be dissolved so that a new one got formed, because there was new ownership and a little bit different project. And then we also discussed amenities that the city council was going to want, and planning commission, and I think it's the same, some of the same amenities that we're proposing now, and that they needed to be built on the first phase. In August of 2018, we met with, again, Carol Butler, Susie, Dara, and other city staff to discuss the PID, and we provided a term sheet. And at that point, all indications seemed like they were positive. So we had our attorneys start preparing all the agreements, and they've been corresponding with Dara and the other attorney ever since that meeting. On September 18, 2018, our zoning changes were approved, and then we closed on the remaining 33 acres, just in anticipation that all this was going to get worked out. And then from August to December 2018, we were told to be patient because of the new city manager getting into the hang of things, and it was just, and so our attorneys were exchanging some comments on the development agreement, but we never got any feedback other than just be patient. And that time, it was during that time that we thought, hey, while the city's working on that, let's look at doing the senior housing. So we did all our feasibility, got our market studies, and at that point, we decided, or we needed to purchase the 6.4 acre commercial corner, which was owned by someone else at that time. And in February, we purchased that 6.4 acre commercial corner. And on March 2000, last month, we were told that City Council was not in favor of our PID, and that was the first time we really had any feedback of that nature. So we're a little confused, but hopefully we can get this worked out. So on the next page here, you can see our that's the land plan, the most current land plan that we want to propose, and it includes at the entry there's a senior living facility, and then there's a commercial reserve, and then we have enough space to do a boulevarded entry and not have houses right away as soon as you turn into the project, which we think creates a better entry for the community. And then so there's another more detailed, more engineering looking site plan right there. You can see how it all kind of lays out. It fits pretty good. Okay, so on the single family residential community, we've already have our builders committed to certain restrictions. Some of those restrictions are 100% brick or masonry in the front of the house, minimum and some minimum brick restrictions on the sides and the back, 3 to 4 inch caliper trees in the front yards so that we can get a bigger tree up front rather than so it's a more sizable tree rather than waiting a long time. And then another tree in the backyard, wrought iron fencing on lots backing up to the lakes. And since if we do the PID, we do not want to create a rental community, which I know council has had problems with that or issues with some of those, and we would be willing to put some restrictions saying if one builder or investor leases more than X amount of houses, then the PID goes away. I mean, we have no problem doing that because that's not our intention. There's a few pictures here of the type of product that is representative of what our builders would construct. And I know council wants to see a better or higher price home in the community, and so would we. It's we like to work on nice projects, and we still, well, we can't commit to that we can produce homes that are $400,000. We still think it can be a nice community given the limitations of the market here. And we went ahead and got market study prepared by Metro Study. We just got it in today, actually, and pretty much confirmed what our gut was, that that there's been a pickup of home sales, and it turns out that in the 50-foot lot is the lot size with the highest home absorption on and they're saying it's 3 to 4 homes per month per community. I think in some communities it might have been a few higher, some a few lower, but that's what they're saying the average is. On 60-foot lots, they're saying 1.5 to 2.5 per month. And if we back up into how long it's going to take trails at Woodhaven Lakes, we're on, if we do all 60-foot lots, it's a 7.5 to 12.5 year project, and obviously we would try to do everything in our power to increase that. If we were allowed to mix in some 50 or 50-foot lots, we might be able to increase that. But again, that's I don't think council wants to do that, but just throwing that out there in case there's some other things we can provide. But what that also means is there's very few qualified buyers right now for anything over 300,000, and even if we built it, we'd build something that would just sit there, and I don't think the city wants that. We definitely don't want that, and over time, the home sales price would be naturally increasing. In Conroe, we started a subdivision called Woodhaven Forest, and when we first started building, there was homes selling for 130, 140,000. When we were done, they were basically at 300,000. And it was a very similar project to this, with lakes as the amenity, with trails around it, and we also put a senior living community in there, and that's been very successful. Apart from that, increasing development costs are already impacting developers and builders' ability to sell. The impact fee, $3,700, the additional estimate, and we are building everything above the 500-year floodplain. It's not required yet, but it's only a matter of time before the regulations change to require you to build in the 500-year floodplain, and that means that we have to raise everything another 2 feet. And when you do that over 60 or 70 acres, that's a lot of money and a lot of dirt movement. And by the way, all our floodplain mitigation is within our project, so we're not affecting anyone else around us. And then there's just general increases in labor and materials. And lastly, we're competing with other projects and developments that all have a pit or mud set up, and not all. And there's also projects outside of Lamarque that would compete with us, like Lago Mar and some others, and they're all in a mud or in a pit. So it leaves us at a disadvantage if we don't have some kind of infrastructure financing in place. Okay, so we can talk about, let me go over the senior living community highlights a little bit. These are, since this is probably a little newer to most of you guys. So what we're proposing here is it's more of a campus with different, that caters to independent seniors, to seniors that need assistance with one or two things, food, medicine, getting dressed, and then residents that have problems with memory and that kind. We did a market study, and it fulfills a necessary demand. There's no other project like this in Lamarque or Texas City. It would employ the equivalent of 70 full-time employees, and the projected annual payroll costs for those employees are $3 million per year. So it'd be a big employer in the area. And about 35 to 40% of the conditioned spaces would be amenities for the residents, including commercial kitchen, dining rooms, arts and crafts rooms, exercise rooms, movie theaters, bistro, and salon. So it really is a resort-like community. And not to mention on a property tax basis, it would create probably double the amount of tax base than single-family residential over the same acreage would create. So it'd be very, very immediate property tax creation. And then there's the next sheet kind of shows you how the independent living buildings would be overlooking the lake, and it lays out pretty nice over there. So to the left of the main entry is the independent living portion, and to the right is the assisted living portion. And there's also some cottages that are on the lower right hand that kind of create a good transition to the residential community. And those cottages have their own garages and their own kitchens. They just have access to the services, but they don't actually need them. And they've been very successful in our project in Conroe. And so here's some pictures of our project in Conroe. That's the dining room right there. There's an arts and crafts room, and there's activities every day. There's also a shuttle and a van that takes them places. The courtyards are very nicely landscaped. Okay. And last topic about our project is the neighborhood and community amenities. Like I mentioned before, there's going to be about 18 acres where people can fish. There's playgrounds, barbecue grill, outdoor fitness equipment, jogging trails, and really nice landscaping. And then you guys can see the renderings. So I guess our conclusion is, even though our home price range is still going to be in the 200 to 300K range, we still think that we're planning a very high quality mixed use development. Unlike, really unique. I don't think there's anything like what we're planning. And not only that, we're going to control one of the senior living facility too, which we will develop ourselves, and we won't sell off that commercial reserve. So we're on the driver's seat on that, and we can create property tax valuation almost immediately with that. And we're asking just to be on an even playing field to our competitors. And the benefit of doing a PID is that you guys can restrict some activities that you don't want us to do, and we're probably okay with, because I don't think we want to do things such as create a rental community and there's some other things that I've been briefed that council doesn't like, that we've already actually integrated into the development agreement. Things such as the city doesn't want to maintain the driveways and the sidewalks in front of the houses. We've already built that into the development agreement that the HOA is going to maintain all that. The HOA will maintain the lakes. There's a few other things that we had talked about. I can't remember exactly what those were. But. So we really think it's a win-win for all parties, and what we're asking for is to allow us to assess the homeowners just like another mud or the neighboring mud or PIDs do, and then to allow us to use those assessments to then later potentially have the city sell bonds based on that. And the city would not be on the hook for those bonds. Only the property owners will. And so that's our ask.
So, Mr. Is it? I'm sorry,
Tony.
Padua.
Yes, sir.
I'm a little disturbed because March of 2018, you said that the agreement kept getting tabled and you didn't know what was wrong, and then there was a conference call late in March, and it says in late March you got feedback for the first time that council was not happy with your PID.
That's correct.
Did you peruse or review or observe any minutes from any council meetings that Woodhaven Trails was discussed? Have you ever seen any minutes from any meeting where your proposed property development was discussed?
No. So to my knowledge, it wasn't discussed when we weren't here.
Okay. So let me say this, because I'm not happy, because I'm part of this council, and I at no time communicated what I wanted or didn't want from your development. So the next question is, who told you that council was not happy with your PID or your ask?
Well, in a conference call with Charlene and Dara, they mentioned that we didn't have enough amenities, that that council didn't want a starter home community. They wanted $400,000 homes, and I think those are, and that we had council didn't like the fact that we weren't okay with putting binding us to or binding ourselves to develop the second phase within a certain amount of time. Uh-huh. Those were did I understand those correctly, or? Yeah.
Clearly, again, let me say for the record, and then we can if I have to, I'll just go this way, because this is one of those days for me that yeah. So let me do it diplomatically.
Okay.
Let me say to you again, I've never made any comment on your development, so I have no idea what we're referring to when we say council isn't happy. Maybe I'm inclined to do a PID personally. That's open. That's on the table for me. I don't want $400,000 homes. I don't think that they can sell. I think that you're spot on with much of your projections. I never said that I wanted a hotel. So I can keep going on and on and on. Whatever this is in your presentation, let me say, I don't know if it came from our people, as council said, or if this is something maybe that you observed, and maybe this is how you put it into words. But this council has not officially acted on anything. And if we don't officially act on it, we cannot unofficially act on anything. So I'm open. So guess what? You're making your presentation to at least one new person. And I'd like to open it up to the rest of council. I don't know if I said this yet, but let the record reflect that Councilwoman McAuliffe joined our meeting at about 5:01. I'd like to open it up. The question is from me to the rest of this council. Casey, I believe it's on page, if you look at page 3, turn to the third page. And I'm just going to catch you up to speed and I'm going to ask Chris to respond. But it says March 2018. If you could read that for us silently, because apparently we've acted. Chris, do you have any idea what's happening in that section?
Yes, so in March 2018, there was a meeting that I was present and the mayor was present also. And so the discussions that took place wasn't on the behalf of the council.
Okay.
And it was articulated, in my opinion, as specific members that had that once.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't just like we were just speaking, like the council.
Gotcha.
We were representative as the mayor and Councilman Lane.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that takes care of that. You spoke with a couple of, and I believe this is Councilman Lane's district, and so certainly, whatever he feels that his district needs is gonna carry some weight.
For sure.
But you've now heard officially that I haven't heard anything about this. Apparently, I don't know if Mr. Mishich, his name is in this document. Maybe he has. Councilwoman McAuliffe may or may not have heard anything about your presentation. But you have a listening audience now, and that's the most important thing. I don't want you to come into this part of our discussion with an understanding that we are not prepared to act in a way that we see fit as it relates to the best interests of our city. So at this time, I'm going to ask you a question about your plan.
Sure.
You said earlier that you studied senior living, and you feel like that part of your plan will do well in our city.
Yes.
Have you studied any other types of housing? Because the one thing that I've been an advocate for our city would be more of a townhome style living. I don't know that we have any of those types of development in our city, and there are a lot of folks that no longer have small children and aren't looking for a 60-foot lot. Maybe they're looking for a place that they could live, that they can call their own without having all of those maintenance issues. Have you looked at a townhome style, condo style?
We definitely have. We haven't studied as it relates to this property, but we actually are actively building townhomes in Houston. And kind of related, but probably not really, we've done, as part of the senior housing community, there's a section of it called the cottages, which are they're duplexes and triplexes with, where they have their own garage, their own kitchen, everything that you would want. And the only thing that sets it apart as being senior living is that it's next to all these amenities that they have access to. Like if they want meals, they can get them. If they don't, they can cook their own. And so that was very successful over there. And I know there's certain communities that are just age restricted, senior living, such as Del Webb and a few others that it's not a townhome per se, but they're a little they're on smaller footprints.
So I guess the answer to that is you hadn't really seriously considered this outside of a senior living arrangement for this particular project.
Correct.
Would you be open to that?
I think so, yeah, if it
And
makes
that's-
sense.
This is just me talking. That has
Yeah.
nothing to do with them. I'm just curious.
I think so.
Okay. Okay, I'll open it up to the rest of the council, and I'll come back and visit with you in a minute.
Okay.
Just a quick clarification question. Hi, Mr. Padua.
Hi.
Nice to see you. About the senior living, did I just completely miss that in the previous times this has come to us? And it was always part of the
No,
plan? Or is
so
this a new development?
we started looking at that back in the fall of last year. Kind of after the last city manager resigned, and when there was, you guys were trying to get it, Charlene caught up, and we were being patient. So we started we got a market study done, and let me backtrack a little bit. We built one in Conroe, in a community very similar to this, where housing was in the back. There was also a lake, and then we put it on a commercial reserve. We delivered it in 2017. Is that correct? And it's been 99% occupied, for the last 7 or 8 months. And it's basically a lot of amenity, highly amenitized. About 35 to 40% of the interior spaces are common areas like dining rooms, arts and crafts rooms, fitness rooms, salon, therapy rooms, movie theaters, and they have very nice courtyards as well. So back to your question, around October or November, we got the market studies back, and we had the same architect that did our Conroe draw up some conceptual plans, and we ran our numbers on it, and it works if we can get it done.
And so it would sit on part of the commercial space of
Yep.
the entire development. Okay. And do you guys partner with so I know there's quite a few senior living management companies out there. Is that something that you then bring in, or is it you build the facility and then it's there waiting for someone to come in and pitch us, or is it already part of the deal wrapped in?
It's part of the deal, and we partner up with that manager.
Okay.
So in Conroe, he had a 10% ownership of the project. We'll probably do something similar to here. And
So
the name of that,
you'll work with the same company again?
yeah,
Okay.
they're called Paradigm Senior Living, if you
Okay,
want to look them up.
That's one of the big ones I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that answers my first question. I'll cede the mic for a second. Thank you.
Tony, on y'all senior living, there's 11 other places around here for retirement and senior living within this south of, say, Webster to here, including Galveston. Your numbers where you say 70 employees and you got a $3 million head, you'd have to have $5,000 a month for 50 residents in order just to meet the payroll number. And you've got to make a profit, and there's other costs too. I had my mother in Brookdale, which is another
It's a big one.
in 2 different facilities. And by the time all was said and done, and she passed away about just over a year ago, that was right at $5,000 a month. I don't see that being that affordable here. I mean, it gets very short term. And then the trend in these things, because of the demographics that are aging, what I had witnessed since she had been at the just assisted living over in Webster, where she did everything on her own. She did her own laundry, she did everything by herself. She had no cognitive problems at that time. And that was still over $3,000 a month. And they provided the food. And then they changed things to where food was going to be separate. And you got an allotment and if you went over it, you paid for that. Amenities, what I see in the different ones continually are being cut or reduced or something like that. and not as much staff. And so that assistance, is not what it's cracked up to be unless you've got just and $5,000 chokes a horse, but it's not near enough, when it comes to the help that you have to pay, for cognitive care. Those are real risky, and I do know that, the previous, owner of Brookdale, they sold out to Brookdale, you know, it's fluid. It's always in flux, you know, and unless you were actually going to manage it, 10% ownership in it is just, you're taking a rake off of the profits, but, you know, you don't really have a say in the management of it. It leads that puts some things at question for me, and I'm sure for some others. I know Mayor Hawking has expressed some concern about that. You know, if we were here just on that alone, that would be a whole different ballgame. But this thing was originally pitched as you know, a residential neighborhood, and I'm still open to that. I think where things have gotten crosswise is, and I'd like for Dira to speak, there were some proposals put in for this PID, you know, that would be contingent on the approval of it, that protects the city. And I've yet to hear from our bondsman that we wouldn't be on the hook for the bonds. I know that's been stated, but it's like, somebody's gonna have to really convince me, our bond person, that that's even possible, because if there's any kind of default, then, you know, somebody's gotta pay it, you know? I don't wanna go against our credit rating, and I don't want it to impact our ability, for future bonds. But there were some things about timeline restrictions and everything, if things weren't performed, you know, as agreed to, that PID would dissolve. And one of the other things that I didn't see in there was that if this property was to be sold or flipped, that PID goes away. It doesn't follow it. I'm not going to approve something for somebody else. So, you know, those are some things that still would have to be worked out, and I know that was an impasse with y'all at the last meeting. I was not able to be at it, but we were given a brief, and without some of those restrictions, you know, and if that young lady right there, who I have a lot of respect for, if she doesn't come back and with that warm fuzzy feeling, you know, then, you know, I couldn't support it. But I'm gonna support her. She's here to represent us and protect the city, and it's a two-way street. We've got to have those guarantees that you guys are on the level that, and you're gonna pull this off. And it's not a matter of just getting a PID and then you can make a profit flipping this property. I can't do that.
So who's the young lady you're talking about, Robert?
Dear Purcell.
So dear, let me ask you this. Talk to me like I'm a third grader. These requirements that you're trying to put in this agreement, right? Did I mess up already?
Well, so if you don't mind me, can I jump in for just a second?
Yeah, help
Is
me.
that okay? So let me clarify a few things, and one, let me apologize if we've given any impression that we're speaking for council as staff. I think we've tried multiple times to say, you gotta talk to council. I know that, you know, we definitely do that on the calls, and I know, you know, we even recently had some emails where they said, you know, hey, can Darren and Charlene give us some feedback on this? And the answer is no. You really have to go talk to council. So I think that's where we got to here.
Okay.
So, you know, let's, just so I can make it clear as far as our position is, you know, my marching orders were that the city might be interested in a PID based on the term sheet. Big might.
Your
there.
marching orders.
My marching orders
So
from.
you're marching.
from the previous city manager,
Okay.
Carol Butler.
Okay.
This meeting right here is basically the culmination of those marching orders. So we were told, yeah, they might be interested, come back with a development agreement. Everything that's happened since then is an attempt to come to an agreement on something in writing for council to consider. We have now hit the point where, as your attorneys, we've kind of hit an impasse, because now we're talking about the details of what's in the development agreement that isn't from the legal side, but from the actual substantive side. What council does or does not want to see in the site plan, in the development, in these details that we're talking about. And so at this point, we haven't been able to get anything, concrete from council yet, other than individual members meeting, with the developer when that was available. I was at the developer's request, and it gave them a feel for a few members, but obviously that is not the full council. So I think that's where we got to here. So if I have ever given an impression otherwise, let me apologize for that. Absolutely feedback from the full council in the meeting. There was a request to do a presentation, and we said, that is a great idea. Come tell council about the details, because we've kind of just gotten to the point where we have all the details on this development. So I think that's what, Julie Pertain is your attorney at Bracewell. She's been working through the bulk of this deal, and she definitely covers the bonds section of that. My understanding, and I'll tell you from the statutory side of it, I'm pretty comfortable with saying that no, the city would not ever be on the hook for the bonds. They're not as, maybe as desirable a set of bonds as you would normally get from a city, because they are issued against the assessment and not against the city itself. So it's going to be a little different risk on those bonds.
A risk for us, or a risk for the developer?
A risk for the person purchasing the bonds. So the end user of the bonds, I would say. As far as having a feeling one way or the other on this development, I think at this point, legally, we are not yet in an agreement as far as the form of the development agreement. As far as the substance, I'm here as much as the developer to hear what it is that the council does and does not want in this agreement, and if you want to move forward or not.
Okay, here's what I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
Robert is talking about different things, different points, different, whatever you want to call them, being put in this agreement, right? I'm hearing them say there's things that we need in this agreement, My question is, what are those things that he keeps referring to? And is that standard in every PID agreement?
So the assignment language where they can't assign it out to anyone, statutorily, we can't put that into the agreement. I believe we do have some anti-assignment language in there where the city would get to approve it before they turn around and sell it to someone else for just those reasons. Every PID is a little different, just like every development agreement is a little different. This hasn't been too far off the standard in the sense that we're able to use, Bracewell's standard PID development agreement form to work off of. Something that is unusual in this PID is that it is a reimbursement PID. Normally, a developer would get their money up front by the city issuing bonds. In this case, they're going to build the infrastructure first and then be reimbursed. So that's a little different. I wouldn't say this is too far off the norm, but we're not at a point. I think council, a couple of agenda items months back on agendas, we sent out a draft, I think, of the development agreement to try to get some comments back. We didn't get much as far as comments on it, but, we're still working through that process. So in this case, it's, not so much about what is your boilerplate or your standard stuff that goes into a PID agreement, but what it is that works for both the city and the developer if you enter into this agreement.
So here's what, instead of just questioning you, because that can take forever, and it's already like 5:27. Is there anything that we're trying to put in this agreement that is specific to these gentlemen in any way?
You mean specific as far as
to their company, to them, to their company, to their plan? What I don't want to happen is for us to be treating companies differently. I don't want us to say, well, Ellis, you're doing a development, and that's quite all right with us, Ellis. Good job. And then we go to Miss Patty, and well, Miss Patty, you're doing one as well, but we want you to do 7 different things that we didn't ask Ellis to do. If we're doing that, Dira, ooh.
Understood?
Can I speak to that for a minute?
You may.
I don't think we're really asking that. This is, in some of the other instances, say like where we had a rental neighborhood pop up, we didn't have developer agreements in place. But a lot of times the developer, if they've got their land and in the way it's zoned, they can pretty much, as long as they're within the law, they can build what they want. But when we are going to do the assistance, that's where it comes in, and we may ask some things. I had sent a list of some things when this thing first came up back with when Ms. Butler was here. One, I'd like to see a mayoral appointment to the HOA board from the very beginning. I'd like to ensure that all HOA meetings are held within the city limits. These are things that help build cohesiveness for a community. And when it was pitched, the senior living was not part of it at all. That still gives some concern. There may be a market, but I'm not so sure it's going to be able to support all those amenities in our territory. But the other items were to protect us. If we're going to do the PID, how does this work on default? And you're saying we won't be on the hook? Is that what? I haven't heard it from her, but okay. Well, that alleviates one thing. But then there was some timeline restrictions. I believe you were trying to wanted to put in there that would help protect us to ensure that this thing just doesn't sit there, and that it's going to be built. I would hate to see infrastructure put in place and you get reimbursement through the bonds and don't do anything more. And that's a possibility.
So,
So what we're saying here, Mayor Pro Tem, is, we're not really asking anything different. We have learned from some past mistakes, and we're for development. I know I am, and I want to help, but I do want to protect the city.
You said something, Robert, and I want to ask Dira to help me with it, because I'm trying to understand it a little better. You said just now that you would like to prevent an instance where hypothetically the infrastructure would be completed, right? And that they would then be reimbursed before any property is sold to any potential homeowner. Did you just say that?
That's, yeah.
Okay,
that's
is that something that we should be in fear of, or?
so that would be kind of a common concern in any PID and any development agreement. As far as the details on this one, you've got an executive session on your agenda tonight, and so that may be a good place to get some
I don't think we do.
details on that. Oh, okay. So basically, as far as the details on that, we would talk to you as your attorneys and give you specific advice on those, usually in an executive session. If we have to do that under attorney-client privilege, I can do that. But that is a kind of a common concern. It is not uncommon to have a deadline. I think we were looking at, correct me if I'm wrong here, was it a 40-year PID? 30-year? It's a pretty long-term PID, and so, one of the concerns that you see from cities in general is how long is our obligation to issue bonds going to sit out there? And so that was kind of the question, is if this is a long-term agreement, what is the timeline for the development phases? Are we going to be in this agreement for 30 years before something happens? And those would be really standard things to put into development agreements. So at this point, I don't think you have covered anything that is terribly detailed or specific to this developer. Now, something that has come up multiple times that would come up in any development agreement is just trying to nail down the details of what is planned to be built and on what timeline.
And when we talk about a rental neighborhood, those restrictions are actually put into the HOA guidelines.
Yeah.
Whether it's a 3%, 5%, max capacity, and then that's governed by the HOA, and that covers that. It protects the builder and everything, they don't have to worry about it. It's in the HOA, and then, it protects us about.
Well, in the interest of talking about details like what might be built, because that's the thing I can sink my teeth into best, because a lot of the other stuff I am very much relying on the expertise of other people. Thank you. I have a couple of thoughts about the current site plan. So I'm also very aware that, I haven't attended any of the planning and zoning meetings where maybe this came up, so I've read through things that are in our agenda notes, but I might be bringing up things that have already been addressed, so forgive me if I do so. I'll leave the senior living thing to the side, just because it is a new thing and I'm thinking about that, and I agree, I'm not totally sure how I feel about that. I trust that you said you did market research, and so you wouldn't put a plan in place if you didn't think it could potentially thrive. So, but again, I'll put that aside. My first thoughts are, I am in favor of mixed size lots. I am aware of the conversation that's happened in the past few years about pushing for bigger size lots because we're trying to, elevate the quality of home. We're trying to encourage people who want to settle down and really bring enrichment and bring, encourage spending more money here, all that kind of great things. However, I am also very much in favor of a neighborhood not all looking exactly the same. So the biggest thing I see when I see the site plan is that it's a grid, and that bums me out. And to just be blunt about it, I would love to see more variation, a more dynamic plan that incorporates different size lots. However, different size lots with smaller homes on them too. So what I was walking into just a second ago was, hearing, I understand, Councilman Lane and the mayor, I totally respect them maybe wanting more expensive homes and hotels. I, on the other hand, am far more concerned with incorporating folks who maybe don't want to buy a $350,000 home, and they want to buy more like a $200,000 home, but they want to buy a nice home. I think that comes from my perspective of my generation as well. I think more and more people, especially young people who might stay around this area, don't want to buy a massive home. But I also think it adds aesthetic interest and just a kind of dynamism to a neighborhood where not every single home is the exact same size on the exact same lot on a street where there's one tree in each lot, because that's not what I want to see in Lamarque. And on that note, you had to know I was going to talk about trees. And Tony, you and I have talked about trees before long ago, so I know you like them, which is a good thing. But I would want to see in a plan specifics about what kind of landscaping are we talking about? I want to see a developer that says, we're going to put in this many trees. We're going to put in more trees than your average little stick that gets put in. And we meet a requirement and we move on. I want to see native trees. I want to see trees planting so that in 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, we have a beautiful neighborhood that is well shaded, has canopies, and it's a beautiful place to live. I think we all know about the data that shows that enhances quality of life. More people want to live in a neighborhood like that. It's better for a healthier, higher quality of life. And on that note, there's a mention here about carving out potentially 2 to 3 lots and making a green space. Well, I didn't see that on the plan, but there was that pretty little photo about we could do this, and there's those beautiful Photoshop people in there. But I don't see it here. I want to see it in a plan. And I would like to see more than just 2 to 3 lots. And particularly if we were to go in a direction where there was larger lots and smaller lots interspersed, I would think that might free up some more space for you to create more planned green space.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can only speak for myself. For me, green space is important from a playground perspective, of course, and from a recreational perspective, but also just for creating a more dynamic neighborhood. It doesn't all have to be super fantastic playgrounds. It can just be beautiful green space planted with trees that's planned to just be flood mitigation. It's a rest for the eye, that kind of thing. And the other section on here about the commercial reserve, are there ideas about that already? What would that look like if we were to approve this plan today and you were starting to build tomorrow? What would that look like? Would that end up being a giant slab where you don't build anything until somebody comes along? How does that work?
Yeah, we'll just leave it as a reserve until
You have a deal
until there's more rooftops.
So it's just undeveloped area until something comes in place. Okay, cool.
Which is also, where the senior living is, that could also be a reserve. And until everyone was comfortable on it, like, that senior living doesn't have to be part of this agreement. We put it in there because we thought, it might help you guys, or you guys might like it more to go ahead and get this deal done, this development agreement. But if it just confuses a development agreement, we'd rather just leave it out and just leave that, treat that separately, because the senior living doesn't benefit from the PID that much, really. What benefits from the PID are the houses.
Tony, are you telling me that could just be a big, beautiful green space?
Or
For a couple of years.
or I've been beating the drum about different types of housing stock. Townhomes, condominiums. I'm telling you that that's something that I'm interested in. I'm one vote. And so you're going to need some folks to vote here soon. I don't know where you got the senior living idea from. Sounds like Rob is having heartburn about it. Sounds like Casey might be a little unsure about it. I hadn't heard from Chris, but I know this. It's my goal to diversify the housing stock. And all we have is single-family homes. And we have them in Sawgrass and Delaney Cove and Prairie Knolls and all these other Barondo Pines. We don't have any way to diversify. And I think that certain areas of our city would benefit from different, and I think that your development would benefit from different styles, different types of housing stock. I think there are a lot of younger people, a lot of millennials who just want a roof, a garage, a place to sit on the patio. They're not interested in large backyards for dogs or children. And there are a lot of folks like myself whose children are grown. I don't need a backyard. I don't need all these things. I just need something a little different. And so I encourage you, if you're going to do anything, I would encourage you to look at that part of it. If you're looking at the senior living, I would encourage you to look in that direction, personally. Okay. Chris, you got anything?
Yeah, so like the one question I have, we spoke about during the March meeting would be regarding the hotels. Did you happen to do any research, any like market study or market analysts on how they would play in that location?
So before we purchased this commercial reserve from the owner, I know he had it listed with a broker, and they were going after all kinds of different types of developments. And I don't think he ever got any traction from the hotel developers. We don't think it's a good spot for a hotel.
Okay.
It just.
I will say, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem about the condos. That's actually gonna produce more tax revenue than the senior living one. But I also wanna say something about the lot sizes. Our standard lot size is 50. And we had some market research done by our EDC, and we had been granting all these variances down to 50-foot lots. And what we were seeing was the feedback from the homeowners themselves, and When we look at, that's why we push the 60-foot wide. It's not about $400,000 homes. Yes, the mayor had said that and wanted actually, but it would take larger than a 60-foot wide lot.
Yep.
But on the 60s, when on the 50s, just a 1,500 square foot house, they were leaving 5 foot on each side. By the time, you couldn't even get your garbage cans in back there, or, they had to go in front, and that's a restriction. So then they end up having to put them in the garage, and a lot of people didn't want to do that. They want them outside. So we went back to we stuck to our ordinance of the 60-foot wide lots, and that's where we're at. It's not to put a $400,000 home, but, and there's still, all sizes go on there, and 60 by 90, that's still a small lot. And, so we're not asking the nice homes like you're proposing. You're in everything right now is in the $200,000 plus range. I mean, that is the market, and it continually goes up. Hence why we got such a property tax issue within the state that we hope to get resolved, because it's the tax burden itself is a problem for people. But and even if you built condos, you're probably looking at a couple of $100,000, at least $180,000 per condo to do something like that. But there are a lot of people, they don't want to cut grass. They want a spare bedroom for guests temporarily, because you don't want your kids moving back home. That's kind of me, but
Little sidebar.
I love them, but so yeah, there is a need that, and we don't have that currently. So,
Well, the original agreement, the agreement draft that we have, that Dara has, that we've been going back and forth on, it mentions nothing about the senior living, nothing.
and not to interrupt you, but what Councilwoman McCall said about it being a grid, there was the document y'all floated when y'all first came. It was just artist rendition something, and it did not look like that at all. It almost looked like, if I wished I'd have saved it, I thought there was like parking stuff that was kind of in the middle of it, I just don't remember.
that.
Yeah, and it looked totally different from what is coming down now. And there's two people sitting in the back from our Planning and Zoning Commission, and it's gonna be interesting when you bring that before them, if this is what you present, because I just happen to know how they are.
So it sounds like we want a little more, just to give you consolidated feedback, at least from what I'm hearing about what this looks like visually, is more integration of different style homes. Possibly it would be really interesting. I agree, it would be really interesting to see what it would look like to incorporate townhomes. And I want to see some smaller homes. I'm fine with them being on 60-foot lots, but I just would like to see some smaller homes. But I would also be open to 50, but I would want to hear more from planning and zoning before I talked too much about that. I want to see more detailed plans about what would be the plans for for landscaping, planting, and for it to not to look so linear, so spreadsheet-like. At least that's what I was picking up on.
So let me try to, because we have a item B as well. Let me try to see if there are any objections, because we can't vote. Doesn't say that we can take any action, but we can definitely say if we object or not, and that's how we know who's where. So obviously, we are interested in moving forward with you in this project. Do I have any objections?
I'm still there.
Yeah,
You still good? Okay.
I'm still in favor.
Obviously, we want to see a more of a mixture in housing stock. examples. Obviously, there are gonna be 60-foot lots on at least a good majority of, or a good portion. There's a style home that can go on that lot. There can be 40-foot lots, 30-foot lots, or whatever they are for the townhome condo style living. If there is a way to have two separate maps, where you can have a few of the 50-foot lots so that we can look, because that's something that we're interested in, and the rest 60 with a different style of home, right? So you have two maps, 60-foot lots, townhome condo style living, one with a few 50, one with a few 60, and a smaller home, right? All of those things are things that we're interested in with you right now. Is there anything else we'd like to? The design of the actual
Green
development.
space and more of it. I wanna see of it.
More imagination and creativity. Definitely sounds like more green space, more play space. I'm sure Chris is going to tell you he wants to make sure the children are taken care of. Did I get everything that we're talking about on that part
From a
of it?
design point of view, I think
design.
so.
Okay. Are you good with your understanding?
I think if we can offset with a few by mixing up the product a little bit, if we can make up some of the lots that are going to be lost to green space, maybe not all of them, I know we can make it work and a little more interesting. It's just
Okay.
I see condos, Memorial Park area, of course, we're not gonna build like that, but, they are a two-story and, duplex condos on the same lot, They pretty much take 60 foot, to put on there, but you get 2 units on that lot, and that also, but it is, it fits for the condo. It doesn't have to be that high end like over there in that area of town, but,
Yeah.
and they're mixed within the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So,
Dara, go ahead.
thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just to clarify, so the way the project has been submitted so far in the sense of a kind of an informal site plan for purposes of working through the development agreement, has been in compliance with your existing zoning ordinance. Some of the items that are discussed tonight would require a planned unit development, so they'd have to go through a zone change in order to do that. And I just want to make sure that everybody's on board that that's kind of what we're talking about here, is adding a piece to this puzzle. So when you start diversifying and changing those lot sizes, we may end up with a planned unit development. Okay?
Does anybody have a problem with that?
I'd like to see as many as possible as 60s,
Yeah.
and
But does anybody have a problem
And you
with
can put a
us
small house
going through a zoning change? Are we all good with that?
I'd have to go to a board of.
I mean, I'm
Adjustment.
comfortable with exploring that option,
Okay.
you know?
Okay. So
Present it, that's all you can do is present it and see what's.
so are you good with so far with what your marching orders are?
so come up with a planned unit development, basically.
Right, and you're gonna work with Dira on that, right? Okay, y'all gonna make everything.
Well, in the sense that we'll come up with the paperwork and keep working through the development agreement, get the details into the development agreement, and we'll bring
back.
that back in. The PUD, as far as the substance of that, all I can do is, give them the minutes from this meeting, but
Okay.
I can work them up with it.
All right, so that's A. Now we have about 10 minutes to go to B. And B is a presentation discussion regarding proposed creation of trails at Woodhaven Lakes Public Improvement District Number 4 within the corporate limits of the city of Lamarck, and to provide direction to the city manager. Did you get the direction from the first part of this discussion?
Yes, sir.
Now we're on the second part, the PID. Do we need to talk to Susie or who we're talking to? Doesn't matter.
So, long story short, it's unusual.
Before you finish, dear, let me reflect that Mayor Hocking arrived at about 5:50.
Thank you, and I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem and the council for allowing me to come
I'm sorry,
late.
not 5:50.
I've got
5:45.
2 giant holes in my back, and without pain meds, it would have been excruciating to sit here for a couple hours, so thank you.
Go ahead, dear.
So, long story short, normally, PIDs do not get created until the development agreement is finalized.
Okay.
This is actually at council's discretion. That's the item that's on the agenda tonight, so you can discuss it there. What we're talking about is the PID is an integral part of this process as far as the project is concerned. At some point, we would need to create the PID.
Okay.
If we're gonna enter into the development agreement. If you create the PID and don't have the development agreement, then we either have to come up with that at some point, and we'd still be subject to the statutory procedures as far as service and assessment plans for all the lots within that area. And so that's why generally you wouldn't create a PID until you have a development agreement,
Okay.
but you can
That's
do
fine.
it either way.
Totally understand why that is the way it is. I am inclined to make sure that our folks, that the Padawas
So nice.
do their due diligence, present a plan that we can accept before I personally create a PID. I'm interested in creating the PID personally, but I think that as incentive to get you all to expedite this next part of what we're doing, I would say that we wait until we have the agreement. But there are three other folks, and I don't know if the mayor is actually officially a part of this or if he's getting his bearings, but definitely,
I was watching at home, actually.
yeah, we let him know he had an excused absence. So let's go this way, get our thoughts, and then if the mayor wants to weigh in, we'll do that after you all make your thoughts.
I'm not sure I completely understand the implications of were we to do it one way or another. What would be your recommendation? Do you have a recommendation?
I would recommend waiting until you have the development agreement.
Okay.
But it's kind of fine either way. If you are of the opinion that you will enter into an agreement one way or another, it might make sense to create the PID. Otherwise, you're kind of putting the cart before the horse to adopt
Well,
the PID.
That's what I was thinking, and I'm glad to have that confirmed. Great. So yeah, that's how I feel. I think we should wait.
Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I wanna see a revised development plan. Yeah, I'm still in favor. You've answered one of the questions about us being on the hook for the bonds should something happen. I'm still in favor of the restrictions that you have proposed. And I think you still probably have my original list of things, like with the HOA and stuff that would protect us. You know, protecting the city is the number one thing, as well as helping foster development. But yeah, we have to see, is this a viable plan? Is it doable? You know, can you guys put together something?
I feel like we should wait also.
You have anything else?
I would like to really thank every one of you for hearing what we have. I think that there was some sort of a misunderstanding. There is no doubt that we're trying to come to a project that is a win-win, a win for the city and a win for us. There is no way that a developer like us could make this happen without a PID. It just, the numbers do not match. In other words, we will be losing money if we do this project without a PID. All of our competitors, all of our other builders and developers have used either a PID or a MUD. And I'm very satisfied for what I have just heard, your understanding and your focus to see the best thing for the city, but at the same time to understand the intricacies of developing. I really like very much the idea of a mixed plan where you mix different types of products. I think that will enhance the development. We were under the impression or idea that we had to do 60-foot lots, period, not smaller than that. But if we have the choice of doing some smaller lots, that will definitely enhance the project and will be much more successful and will provide more diversity and more options for buyers. So I really, in behalf of the Padua and Tony and my family, I appreciate all your efforts, and we should be coming with a plan that would probably will suit you. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I?
Yes, sir.
For a
Yes,
second.
sir. Yes, sir.
Once again, thank you for running the meeting. In watching online, I just need to put a couple of things into the record. First of all, I believe the first time I've ever heard of this was when it first appeared on our agenda 3 months ago. I've never been invited to a meeting concerning it. I was at City Hall and saw Councilman Lane in a meeting, and I asked him if I could sit in, and he said yes. So I know nothing about what's going on. I don't think either Councilman Lane or myself spoke on behalf of the council. I had no idea that the past administration had recommended a PID over a MUD. So it was fun watching the workshop and finding out all this useful information. And thank you to the Paduas for being here. And you want to take the meeting out?
Yeah, and Mr. Padua, that's why we started the way that we did today, because it's a very dangerous thing to say council said, because outside of this meeting and meetings like this meeting, we have no legal ability to act or to direct anybody. So the first thing for me was to establish that this council has not in any way acted or even made any official commentary on your proposed development. That's why it's important. And as we begin to talk, we realize that didn't happen that way, or that didn't happen that way. And what essentially happened was a council member trying to find the best usage for his district, and that's his job and that's his responsibility. But it still has to come through the platform of this council before we can officially do anything. And so that's all that was about, was to establish that no, we didn't really act. Because if we hadn't, then legally we might have opened ourselves up to some things that we didn't do. Does that make sense? Sure. So thank you all for coming. Certainly, dear, thank you for your work. Susie, thank you for your work. We're going to go ahead and close this meeting. Mayor, do you want to give? We have 5 minutes. We'll adjourn this meeting on a motion, and we'll reconvene at 6 o'clock for our regularly scheduled meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.